Today is Thursday, November 13th. Our friend Dmitry Orlov is here with us. Welcome back, Dmitry.
Good to be with you.
Let's get started, Dmitry, with what's happening in the Middle East and the new administration, Donald Trump administration. Here is what he said in terms of the conflict between Israel and Palestinians. And I'm going to play it for you, but then we talk about it.
But the key is a lasting peace. If we have a lasting peace, first thing you have to ask, do they both want to make it? I have a real question as to whether or not both sides wants to make it. I have a real question as to one side in particular, whether or not they want to make it. Well, I don't want to say that right now. I think one side actually would like a deal, and I think the other one maybe doesn't want a deal, to be honest. I don't want to say it. No. Look, we show our cards too much in the I wrote The Art of the Deal. We show our cards too much. So if I get into that, I don't want to say this and that, and then they'll come and they'll say, well, Trump is biased one way or the other. I think there's a chance that you could probably make a deal if you had a real deal maker, if you had somebody that knew what he or she was doing. In my opinion, if Israel wants to make a deal, I think a deal could be made. I think a lot is going to do with Israel. Look, it's going to have to do with both sides, but a lot will have to do with Israel and whether or not Israel wants to make the deal.
I thought he wanted to make a deal more than Netanyahu. And I will be honest, I had a great meeting with him, Abbas, right? I had a great meeting with him, and we spent a lot of time together, talked about many things, and it was almost like a father. I mean, he was so nice. Couldn't have been nicer. And after meeting with Bibi for 3 minutes, I looked at him and said, you don't want to make a deal, do you? And he said, well, and the fact is, I don't think Bibi ever wanted to make a deal.
Why?
I thought the Palestinians were impossible, and the Israelis would do anything to make peace and a deal. I found that not to be true.
Yeah. Is he going to, he talked about this issue before, but right now with the new administration, these people who are mostly hardcore Zionists in his cabinet, do you think, is he going to change the attitude? Is he going to put some sort of pressure on Netanyahu? He's in power again, and he's the head of government in Washington, but is he able to do that?
Well, the question is who is going to put pressure on whom? The Israelis have infiltrated the American system to such an extent that they can threaten just about anybody in Washington. And that's what they'll want to do. In terms of making a deal, the right deal for Israel is to expel all the Palestinians from Gaza and from the West Bank, take over the Golan Heights and maybe take over southern Lebanon, make it into a depopulated zone, demilitarized, depopulated zone. Maybe grab a chunk of Syria while they're at it. So that's what they really want to do. And what they want to do is somehow coerce or connive or do whatever they have to make sure that the Americans do not withdraw their support. So the question to me is not whether anybody is going to make any sort of deal. It's whether Israel, because the United States is not going to get involved directly knowing that it would be defeated, whether Israel has the military might, even with full American support in terms of weapons production, to actually make this happen. Because what's happening now is the two sides are firing rockets at each other, and the question is which side has better rockets, and my answer is Iran has the better rockets. So that's one thing that's that should be notable in the whole thing, is that the Americans are not the ones calling the shots. The Israelis are, or the Israelis that have infiltrated the United States. And the other thing is that what can Trump actually do? Well, he can sanction Iran. Iran has gone from, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was less than 1 million, maybe 500,000 barrels a day under the last Trump administration because of all the sanctions, to, I think, over 2 million barrels a day. And that is making it possible for Iran to do relatively well economically. So Trump might once again sanction Iran, but things have changed since then. First of all, there's this massive Russian shadow fleet now that can ship oil from anywhere to anywhere in the world. Secondly, there is a trading relationship between Iran and China, and I don't think China would look kindly on Trump's attempts to limit China's oil imports from Iran. And at this point, China has more clout in the matter than the United States. So that may end up as nothing, but it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah. How do you think that the Russian government considers the new administration as a positive sign for the conflict in Ukraine?
It makes no difference at all because there are no points of engagement between the American side and the Russian side. The Russians have spelled out what it is that would be needed to kickstart negotiations, which is complete demilitarization and denazification of the Ukraine. And demilitarization means that the Ukraine has to go back to the conditions under which it was granted independence, which is military neutrality. No role whatsoever for NATO or for the Americans or for any foreign troops on the soil of what is the former Ukraine at this point. Of course, it has to be understood that the Ukraine currently occupies a certain fraction of Russian territory in Donetsk and Lugansk and Zaporozhye and Kherson. And the Ukraine has to be expelled from Russian territory. And that is Russia's government's obligation to secure its territory and also Kursk region, although that part of the territory that's under Ukrainian quote unquote control, it's shrinking by the day. So that's not really something to negotiate about. The other stipulation is that the sanctions that have been that have been imposed on Russia by the United States and the European Union are illegal under international law and have to be lifted before any negotiations can start. So that's another Russian stipulation. I have not heard anything from Washington or from Brussels or from anywhere else in Europe that would indicate any sort of recognition of the Russian position. Instead, they're talking about freezing the line of contact, which is ridiculous because the line of contact runs through Russian sovereign territory. So it's not theirs to freeze. And then another proposal is introducing NATO or European peacekeeping troops along the line of contact. So great proposal, stationing foreign troops on Russian sovereign soil. That doesn't seem like a reasonable proposal. And then 20-year delay. This was proposed this was published in the media. It didn't really come out of the future Trump administration, so nobody knows whether this is somebody's pipe dream or what, but it's been thrown around, the idea of delaying Ukraine's membership in NATO by 20 years. That's also unacceptable because what Russia is looking for is a permanent solution to the Ukrainian problem, not a delay. And what Russia proposed is going back to the last round of agreements that the Ukrainians sort of agreed to until they were told to fight to the last Ukrainian, which are the Istanbul agreements. So that's the baseline from which the Russians would be willing to entertain any sort of new agreement at all. And so there's really no difference between Trump and Biden, whoever else. It really doesn't matter who's in charge. There's no basis in reality to the Western position when it comes to the Ukrainian conflict.
I think right now the main question would be, what do they have to confront Russia, China, Iran, and all these conflicts? We can consider their sanctions and their military power or diplomacy. I think out of these three solutions, for in their mind, we don't have any more solution. But how about if they go after sanctions, as you mentioned, against Iran, China, or even Russia, in order to bring them to the table, or maybe accepting what they have in their mind to have some sort of agreement? How powerful are sanctions today comparing to what it was in 2016 in the first term of the Donald Trump administration? And do you see any sort of sign of these people who are going to be part of the new administration, that they understand that the world has totally changed?
There is some understanding. There was a video on Telegram just today of the new Secretary of Defense that Trump has proposed, where he says that the Chinese can sink all of the American aircraft carriers in about 20 minutes, which is true. What he didn't say is that the Russians and the Iranians can do the same thing. And if the Russians and the Iranians and the Chinese decide to do it, then it's not 20 minutes, it's a lot less. So there is really no way to project power as far as the United States is concerned, except for the nuclear triad. But that's not really a bargaining position, you see. Do as we say, or we start a nuclear war in which we will be destroyed, is not a very powerful position. So what else is there? Sanctions. Well, the BRICS nations have figured out ways to trade without resorting to the US dollar, and are doing it quite successfully, especially when it comes to things like oil. So Russia now has a oil transshipment point in India. All of that is done in rupees, and so that is not something that can be sanctioned without sanctioning India. And how many countries do you get to sanction before you've sanctioned the whole world, and there you are freezing in the dark by yourself because you can't trade with anyone? So that's not really a useful strategy at all. Diplomacy, well, you see, Americans don't do diplomacy anymore. What they do is they threaten, and then they threaten some more, and then they threaten some more, and then they threaten some more. And everybody is at this point thinking, okay, you're threatening me, that's fine, keep going, because they're hollow threats. Because, as I mentioned, even the new Secretary of Defense knows that the only source of power projection other than the nuclear triad that the United States has can be destroyed in about 20 minutes. So what's the use of threatening that then? What do we have left? I would propose a fourth to your three, which is take your ball and go home, which is what the United States should do. They have another problem, which is Trump promised to kick out 10 million illegal aliens, which are mostly men of military service age. I will be very interested to watch how that's going to happen, because I would assume that they will be bussed across the Mexican border, because what else is there to do with such a huge number of people? They will probably have to commandeer every single school bus in the country, and the children will have to walk to school in order to bus 10 million people through the Mexican border. The next thing that'll happen is that these men will be issued RPGs and Kalashnikovs and hand grenades and sniper rifles, and will go back across the border and stage a reconquista where Mexico gets a big chunk of American soil. That would be really fun to watch. So I don't really see the United States doing all that well, given the things on Trump's plate at this point. I think maybe Trump should pretend that he's talking to these leaders and having nice conversations with them and shaking hands and getting lots of respect and smile for the camera and all of that sort of thing. Whereas the substance of all of this is going to be non-existent. That's what I really expect.
Do you think that if they go after that plan that you've just mentioned, sending these people out of the United States, is that going to create inflation in the United States?
Inflation?
Yeah, because they're
Oh,
they're
there's
working. These are they're working in a position that no one in the United States is interested to work on in that position. There's mostly, as you mentioned, and we because at the end of the day, these people are not just invading the United States; they're helping the United States in some sort of minds. If we consider them as invaders and the way that they're trying to, they went to the United States to work and make a new life. Do you think these people are going to harm the United States as the Trump administration is pointing at, or they're trying to make their lives better in the United States? And if they send, as you mentioned, there many people in Democratic Party, they thought that they can use these people in the military, but that's a totally different idea. But at the end of the day, within the society, these people are important because they're working in within the society, they're paying their taxes, they're not totally disconnected with the society. How do you see that? Is that going to make inflation in the United States? Is that going to make some sort of problem within the society?
well, there's already a problem within the society because these people from Americans and jobs are um, becoming increasingly scarce in the United States. The United States is looking at a recession, and so the in the newcomers and the people in the United States is only going to increase over time. And of course, efforts to expel people, to round them up and expel them, will raise the level of animosity within society, the temperature within society, to a new level of intolerance. And given that there are two large fractions within the United States that are literally, at each other's throats, half the country is very upset that Trump won. Um, maybe we'll have three different parties at war with each other. And the rest of the world will be delighted to watch this happen because the rest of the world does not want the United States to do well at this point. What is the most promising development as far as the global majority is concerned, I think, at this point, is that the United States will be so internally conflicted that it will have no time for the rest of the world. That is the right outcome as far as China, Russia, and the rest of the big countries and a lot of the smaller countries are concerned. So inflation, well, a lot of people are talking about financial collapse in the United States. Inflation is just a number. Financial collapse just is a far more pronounced effect, where the United States would no longer be able to borrow trillions of dollars a year in order to cover its costs. And the biggest cost is keeping the federal government going. So once the federal government can't pay out, what remains of the United States? That's a big question.
in your opinion, right now in Israel, it seems that Netanyahu and his administration are so happy with the changes that are happening in the United States. But how, before all of this happening, the Biden administration did everything to help them? I don't know what else the Trump administration would do for them that would be much more important or influential in their fight. Do you think that, or the Smotrich just talking about some sort of mindset that they're having right now? Smotrich was talking about annexation of the West Bank. It seems that in his mind that under Donald Trump, they can annex West Bank, the northern part of Gaza. But how about the other countries? It's not just about Israel. They have to make some sort of, the international community, are they going to accept it? Are they going to go along if Donald Trump decides to support them even in that objective? Or the other, how about the other countries? Are they going to go along? Are they going to just agree with what Netanyahu wants? Because so far we haven't seen any sort of sign. In the southern part of Lebanon, more than 47 days they couldn't capture a single village. And how are they gonna annex the West Bank, the northern part of Gaza, as you mentioned, the southern part of Lebanon, if they're not capable militarily to capture these regions?
Well, you have to understand that at this point, Israel is, it has been small all along. It is now isolated more than ever, and it is psychotic internally. And perhaps the most psychotic individual in the whole country is Netanyahu. So they will entertain all kinds of false hopes, just like the Ukrainians keep talking about winning, and it's the most ridiculous thing in the world. And so the Israelis will also work on this dreamscape where they get to win and dominate. Meanwhile, they have been fighting in Gaza, which is a tiny piece of land, for over a year now, with no sign of achieving the results that they wanted to achieve in 2 weeks. While they blundered into Lebanon with their tanks, lost quite a few men and quite a few tanks, have been able to penetrate for no more than 1 kilometer. Meanwhile, they had to evacuate most of northern Israel along the Lebanese border, and pretty much lost several population centers in that area. And they're being subjected to rocket fire. There is no pretense that they can intercept all of those rockets. And all they have been able to do is lob weapons provided by the Americans at civilians in Gaza and in Lebanon, and to a very small extent in Iran, because they don't have the ability to actually target anything in Iran, it turns out. But that's pathetic, and what the Israelis cannot do is realize how pathetic they have become. So they will grasp at straws and look for reasons to be optimistic. And so the fact that Trump mouths these platitudes about peace and about wanting to negotiate, they can turn around and say, well, Trump is on our side. We want peace too. We're so peaceful after destroying tens of thousands of women and children. We're the most peaceful people in the world. And in the meanwhile, they ignore certain developments, such as Turkey has broken diplomatic relations with Israel and has zeroed out trade. And as it turns out, Israel cannot get any oil from anywhere at this point, except through the Straits of Gibraltar, because Turkey controls that trade from Azerbaijan, which is where Israel has been getting a lot of its oil. So it's really unclear what Israel will be forced to do, no matter what Americans say or do. I think that the Americans will continue to supply Israel with weapons, but that's about it. I don't think the Americans are looking to start a war with Israel. They can't afford it. Um, I mean, with Iran, they can't afford it. So they won't really help Israel except with weapons shipments.
Yet again, when we talk about sending more weapons to Israel, it's the same type of mindset as they have in Ukraine. It doesn't matter how much more they can send weapons to Ukraine. There is no manpower in Ukraine to just grab these arms and use them against Russia. Right now, Israel has some sort of shortage in terms of their military, their population, and they cannot go along with this as they're talking about seven front war against Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. But how is that? Do you find it right now, these people who are in power in Israel, are they realistic with this situation? Because they're talking about expanding the war in the southern part of Lebanon. On the other hand, we had, as you mentioned, the new attitude of Turkey, and we had a summit in Saudi Arabia, all the countries, Sunni, Shia all together. MBS, which is, it seems that Donald Trump has a lot of leverage in him, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, backed Iran in their policy that they're calling what's going on in Gaza as a genocide. And here we are witnessing that before our eyes huge changes. It's not the Middle East that Donald Trump had in his first term. It's totally different, as you mentioned, about Turkey. And we know about Saudi Arabia, UAE, all of these Arab countries, Arab states. They're not doing practically so far. We haven't seen something substantial against Israel, but the rhetoric has totally changed. This is important.
Well, it's not so much the rhetoric that matters. As Israelis are psychotic at this point. But as far as the rest of the Middle East, what they're waiting for is the smell of Israeli blood. They're looking for weakness. And a key part of that weakness is unwillingness of the United States to fight on Israel's behalf. Shipping in weapons is one thing, but actually committing US forces is another. So if once everybody's convinced that no matter what happens, the United States will not join the fray as you would on Israel's behalf. Once that happens, then Israel can be crushed like a little bug by all of these countries together, which will want a piece of it, and who will at least want a seat at the table when the future of Palestine is decided. So that's what that is going to be about once it becomes abundantly clear to everyone that Israel can be crushed. We're not at that point yet. So what Turkey has done is one step in that direction. And we're looking for other Arab states which are weaker. After all, the Turkish army is, I think, the third largest after in NATO, second largest if you don't count the Ukrainians. And so that is significant, but other Middle Eastern armies are much smaller, and they're not likely to join any sort of a useful or form any sort of a useful coalition because there are too many internal contradictions. But they're thinking about it. Obviously, they have to think about it. It's their neighbors. Palestine is right there, and it's the Holy Land, and they have to, as a matter of national pride, they have to do something when it comes time to dismantle the state of Israel.
Do you find Donald Trump capable of making some sort of division between Iran, Russia, and China?
No, that's laughable. I mean, these three will hold their hands and laugh at Trump together because these are ancient cultures that have thousands of years of diplomacy between them, and they're neighbors, and they will be together forever. Whereas the United States is some territory on the other side of the world, and it has a leader who will probably turn into a lame duck in 2 years, and will probably take 2 years to sort out his internal problems, and hasn't become the president yet and might get shot before he gets a chance because people keep shooting at him. So it's absolutely laughable that they would even consider altering their relationship to suit the Americans. That is just outlandishly strange to even consider.
The How do you see right now in the European Union? They're talking about they're not agreeing if Donald Trump decides to go after some sort of talks with Russia because they know, after all, what Russia wants in Ukraine, and they don't agree with that. How capable is the Donald Trump administration to convince the Europeans? Or are they interested in convincing the Europeans to go after some sort of negotiation? Or they want to continue this conflict in Ukraine for the next decade? I don't know what would be in their mind right now.
Well, I think that there is some recognition in Europe, a little bit of a recognition that they can't just take over the Ukrainian conflict and fight Russia to the last European as well as the last Ukrainian. I think that there is, deep down, there is recognition that the Ukraine is lost, just completely lost, defeated, gone, okay? But they can't say that in public because that contradicts what they've been saying in public for a long time, which is we mustn't allow Russia to win. You know, that's been their mantra for a long time. So they can't go from saying we mustn't allow Russia to win to saying we allowed Russia to win, because the next thing they have to do is pull the revolver out of their desk drawer and shoot themselves in the head. And none of them actually want to do that. The alternative is to basically, you know, pull out of politics. Say, okay, well, we're idiots. We don't know what we're doing. Goodbye. We're just going to go and walk dogs, or, you know, find a new profession for ourselves, mow the neighbor's grass. They don't want to do any of that. They don't want to. They're not yet at the level of understanding that they're about to be unemployed. And there's a bigger problem, which is basically they work for the Americans. They've been conditioned by the CIA and various other US agencies to be US puppets. But the puppet master has changed, so they're the wrong puppets. Now there's going to be a conservative puppet master for 4 years, and they're liberal puppets. And the conservative puppet master will want some conservative puppets. So how do these liberals suddenly change their stripes and start acting conservative? So that's their dilemma. And so they're hysterical. It was absolutely obvious that there was mass hysteria happening at the EU Budapest summit that happened recently. All of these people were looking at each other, and what it reminded me of is something that I've gone through several times while working for corporate jobs in the States. Corporations in the United States eventually get to a point where they have to lay off lots of people. It happens quite regularly. And there's usually some meetings that happen right before the layoffs occur, where nobody knows who is going to be laid off and who is going to be making the decisions as to whom to lay off. And there's this uncomfortable sort of interviewing for a non-existent job atmosphere. And so that's what I saw in Brussels, is everybody there was sort of informationally interviewing for a job that they thought might exist, but probably won't. Because what one would expect is that they're all going to get fired. A lot of them have already been fired by their electorate. It's just that, Europe is such a diplomacy that it doesn't matter who you vote for, they still stay in power, like Macron, for instance. Um, and so and that is going to be happening for a while. Marine Le Pen is supposed to be going to jail for a little while. The biggest party in Germany, Alternative for Germany, is about to get outlawed, I guess, because that's how democratic Germany is. But the basic point is, at some point, somebody in Washington is going to say, "Okay, you clowns, you clear out. We got a new crew coming in," and that's what I expect will eventually happen.
And one of the main issues in the 2024 presidential election in the United States was the situation of the economy, the situation that they're having with their economy, and the inflation, that the people are not happy with this, with the way that they're capable of buying things in the United States. How do you see, if Donald Trump goes after those policies of putting more tariffs on the European Union, at the same time on China, maybe more sanctions on Iran or even Russia, how is that going to help the United States to improve their economy? Or it's going to be different? Because at the end of the day, we know Donald Trump is not interested in, as he mentioned, we don't know about his cabinet right now. Many people are coming into the cabinet with different ideas. It's totally different. Like, you see, you look at Tulsi Gabbard and you compare it with the new defense minister of the United States. It's totally different attitudes. But at the end of the day, if we just consider Donald Trump's position, that he's not interested in wars, and he wants to improve the situation, the economy of the United States, how is that possible if he goes in that direction against China, European Union, Russia, Iran, Middle East?
Oh, I think that he'll pose for the cameras. He'll bluster and he'll threaten, and then he'll have a meeting with somebody, shake hands, smile, say something about some kind of a nebulous agreement, and go home, and then move on to the next country. Because you see, it's not about substance; it's about the image. Now, what will happen domestically, I assume, is that there will be attempts at reform, but the American system is not reformable. It's far too litigious and legalistic. The levers of power are too confused, and there are too many of them. So Trump cannot do the Roman thing and say, "Okay, well, the Senate will appoint me dictator, and I will make all of the decisions on behalf of everyone, and everybody else, all the checks and balances are out the window for the next 4 years while I completely reform the place." The United States has no such mechanism. The United States is not ready for emergency crisis governance. And so what I expect that will happen within the United States is similar to what happened within the Soviet Union. I think Trump is sort of a combination, Trump 2, the current reincarnation of Trump, is sort of a combination of Boris Yeltsin and Mikhail Gorbachev. And the difference is, I think that the similarities are rather striking, because Mikhail Gorbachev was enthusiastically liked for I think the first year or two of his 5-year tenure, and then hated from that point on, and was most enthusiastically hated of any leader Russia has ever had, by the end of his term. And there's a similarity with Boris Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin was very much Russia first. Trump is very much America first. Boris Yeltsin hired a lot of these young, fresh faces to reform the Soviet system, and they crashed it. They pretty much halved the GDP of the country while they were in power. They just completely destroyed it. So that's sort of what I would expect to happen in the United States, except Trump is already hated by half the population. So he's not quite the star that Gorbachev was. He's rather defective as a leader from day one, because half the country is dead set against him. And in terms of him being a Boris Yeltsin, well, he's sober, so that's helpful. Boris was drunk most of the time, but and that's a good thing. But on the other hand, I don't think, being as old as he is, he has the grasp of details, and so he will get all of these clever but inexperienced people who don't know how the system works from the inside. They will try to reform it, and instead of being reformed, it will simply break. It will crash. It will seize up. Internal conflicts will erupt all over the place. Everybody will get maximally litigious and hard to fire, and it'll just persist in that state. And a lot of the people in Washington will bide their time thinking, okay, well, it'll take Trump a year to get anything moving at all, maybe another year when he will actually attempt to achieve something, or at least pretend to. And then things will look so bad that he will lose the midterm elections, and suddenly we'll have Democrats in charge of Congress. And from that point on, Trump is a lame duck, and we have nothing to fear, except getting paid, because by that time, financial collapse will have mostly run its course in the United States, and the federal budget won't be what it is now. So that's kind of what I see happening, is a big mess, not something that is hopeful and optimistic and oh, how do we fix America? How do we make it great again?
In the same interview that you've mentioned at the beginning of this talk about the new defense minister, the new secretary of defense of the United States, in the same talk, he mentioned that China is preparing for a war with the United States. They're getting to the next level. They're preparing to fight with us or attack us. Why, in your opinion, you mentioned these people are so young, they don't have a lot of experience. He has been in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, if I'm not mistaken. How about China? Is China really interested in fighting the United States? What would be the outcome of that? Why would China need to fight the United States? They're not
Oh, it's not
interested.
about, yeah, it's not about fighting. Sorry, it's not about fighting. It's about forcing the United States down. So what the new Secretary of Defense said, he said a couple of interesting things. One is that, as I mentioned, China can destroy the American aircraft carrier fleet in about 20 minutes. And he also said that the aircraft carrier fleet is the main form of power projection that the United States has, other than the nuclear triad, and using the nuclear triad would be suicidal. And he didn't say that, but we understand that. And he also said the most interesting thing is that China is not preparing to fight the United States. China is preparing to destroy the United States. Destroy. Okay? So the question is not whether there's going to be a war between China and the United States. We know that there won't be. The future Secretary of Defense told us that. There's nothing to fight China with. But the question is, does the United States want to be destroyed by China? And I think the answer is no. And then the next question is, how does the United States prevent being destroyed by China? And the answer is by capitulating. So that is the word. That's the new word for the new year, capitulation. People should practice saying it until it just, rolls off the tongue. China is not going to fight a war with the United States because the United States will capitulate to China. The Ukraine will not continue fighting Russia because the Ukraine will capitulate to Russia. There will be winners. We know who the losers are. We don't yet know who all of the winners will be because there will be a lot of minor conflicts erupting all over the place. There are a lot of American clients around the world who have only remained as political entities on the political map because of American support. Question is, once that American support disappears because the United States capitulates, will they persist? Will they find a way to make peace with their neighbors, or will they also be forced to capitulate?
Yeah, I think in the next 4 years, we have a lot about China to talk about because the United States' main focus is China right now. Thank you so much, Dmitry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.